Today we have the presentation that is the one we've all been waiting for, just the one that I had Brian, I kept saying Brian's presenting, so I've had Brian presenting like multiple times, and it's not Brian, although he's part of our committee, and he will, I think, participate in the Q&A portion along with Dr. Bertley and Joe Nardone from the Columbus Regional Airport Authority, CMH. So let's get started. We're going to start with Dr. Frederick Bertley, President and CEO of COSI, and then we'll move over to Joe and Hannah. I'm going to let you quickly take it away. To Joe and Dr. Bertley, we usually don't introduce the entire committee because it would take up so much of your time if we do that, but you can look out here on the grid if you're at the grid view and see many of your colleagues, people that you know from various sectors in the community, corporate, nonprofit, government, small business, and community. So a good representation of Columbus and in the various sectors. And we look forward to hearing your presentation.
You got it. Well, with that introduction, thank you so much, Christy. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, committee, for the great work you've been doing. I do want to qualify this. I was told to really talk about kind of the museum sector nationally, then the state of Ohio, and then, of course, down what's happening in Columbus. So I'm going to focus on that. I'm glad Brian is on because he's going to get to the bigger picture of tourism in general and travel. And, of course, my colleague, President Nardoni, from the airport will talk about specifically airport. So with that, let me get started. I was told I have 10, 11 minutes. I just want to verify if that is true. All right, so I'm going to do a whirlwind tour of the force with a lot of images to get through this. So here we go. So, all right, this is a really cool graphic that came out by Heart and Minds, and it talks about industry trust. This came out at the beginning of the pandemic. On orange, up to the left, really high trust, low trust is to the right. Well, this is essentially internet and education. We think that COSI kind of fits in there because we do educational stuff, internet stuff. But at the end of the day, we're really part of that restaurant, travel, leisure, and you can see that's the slowest one to come on board. And that bore out. When you talk about the impact on museums, this is national data looking across the country in the US. 71% of museums are open. Currently, 30% are closed now. When you looked early on, you had this really interesting mix that when they asked the question, do you think you'll permanently close? 2/3 said, no, we probably won't permanently shut down, but 1/3 were like, yes, or we're not sure. I mean, think about that. 1/3 of the museums in this nation shutting down. Really incredible. Then you look at they're cutting back on education. 2/3 of them said, yeah, we'll still be open, we'll be something, but our educational programs, we're gonna have to cut those because we can't support them. And then do you see reopening with the reduced staff? Almost half of them said, absolutely, when we open, we're just not gonna have the same level of staff before. All right, when you look at patterns across the country, it's really interesting. Museums like zoos and botanical gardens, including Franklin Park and the Columbus Zoo, they did anywhere from 30 to 55% during these times. And at some points, if you speak to Bruce Harkey, he'll tell you that they had some 60 and 70% days, which is really incredible. But when you look at the art museums, completely different. Across the country, they are static at anywhere between 20 to 27%. They can't get up to 30%. It's too hard. Zoos and botanical gardens, of course, are open. That's why they had more folks. And when you look at the science museum sector, I'm just giving you the lion's share of the top 20 science museums in the country, and half of us are open and half of us are closed. And the difference there is, even though now we know touching stuff is not a big deal in terms of transmission, early on in the pandemic, everybody thought, oh, if you touch something, you're going to get the virus. And so a hands-on science museum is clearly all about touching stuff. So folks weren't really happy about going there. So half of us were closed. All right. If you look in Ohio, there are 4 science museums. And yes, I'm going quick. That was the point. There are 4 science museums. 2 are open, Great Lakes Science Center in Cleveland and Cincinnati, and 2 are closed, Imagination Station in Toledo and COSI. All right. Now, getting down to the city, Columbus's cultural institutional pivot. We should be so proud of this city. It's amazing how these cultural institutions have pivoted and done some really cool things. Everything from Franklin Park and the zoo, as I mentioned, being open and being able to provide good, safe experiences. Lincoln Theater, doing some really cool programming. Columbus Urban League, Stephanie Hightower and her regular town hall meetings were a fantastic resource. Columbus Museum of Art on Saturdays and Sundays, it is free. They open their doors. They got a funder to figure this out, so you can go and it's socially distant. You can feel very safe and it's for free. And then you got the great work of the Heart of Protest that was really led by the King Arts Complex, and part of the steering committee was COSI, the Museum of Art, CAPA, and WOSU. And this was literally putting on 46 days of free programming to respect and celebrate the 46 years of George Floyd's life. All right. And I was also asked to talk about what did COSI do? So this is interesting. What about COSI? Well, yes, we're still closed, but we have been super active. And I'm going to race you through some of the stuff that we've done. Some of it you might know, some of it you might not know. So one, we looked at how can we have a digital footprint, right? Our building is physically closed. How do we take science and educational resources out and push it out? Two, we're known about being a physical space. People want to touch and come to COSI, pull a lever. How do we do that if our building's not open? I'll talk about that. And then three, we lived and died based on partnership. So by the way, we were ranked, thanks to many of you on the screen and people across the country, the #1 science museum in the country in February 2020. By March 2020, we were the #1 science museum in the country. That's close. So bummer there. But what did we do? We had our physical science festival. We couldn't do that because of the pandemic. We pivoted and did a digital science festival. We have an interactive video series for kids in the K-12 space and for teachers. We have a program called The Color of Science, which is all about diversity and equity in the space of science. And then we have this whole digital asset series on our website called COSI Connects. All kinds of videos, new activities, podcasts, science challenge, all kinds of stuff, not just for kids in the K-12 space, but especially those, but also for adults, just to make sure if they're interested. And then finally, you can't physically go to our museum, but you can see 7 different exhibits for a free digital tour. You can go into our AMNH Natural History Gallery and check out the dinosaurs, and there's all these QRC codes and activated augmented reality. So that's the digital through our website, COSI Connects. Physically, you can't come to our building, but we're like, you know what? We're going to put COSI in a box. And we created these cool kits called the COSI Learning Lunchbox. And we talk about partnering with food pantries and food delivery services. So we say feeding hungry minds and feeding hungry lives when we partner with them. This is an example of some of the stuff in the box. There's all kinds of stuff. And what's important for teachers is this is all correlated to the Ohio Science Learning Standards and the National Next Generation Science Standards. So teachers can actually use these kits and check off what they need to be doing in their rubric because it goes back to their standards. You know, we weren't a shop that does this, but we quickly pivoted and figured out how to produce 1,000 of these boxes a week. This is how we are giving them out in partnership again with the Hunger Alliance, socially distanced, really cool stuff. A picture's worth 1,000 words. Look at the line. This is at St. Stephen's. Cars were lining up to get these science kits. Similarly, so then we pivoted and did stuff across the state. This is actually in Parma. Look at the line of cars. We came there with 400 kits. We ended up having 1,200 cars wanting to come and get kits. And so we had to figure that out. So we started off in Ohio, but now there's so much excitement around these kits because, again, they're tied to learning standards nationally. So now we got contracts in Kentucky, Tennessee, and we're working on West Virginia to deliver those kits as well. Third piece is our partners. We partnered with everybody from the lieutenant governor. This is at the Ohio Food Bank, where we gave out 1,200 boxes along with turkeys and food for folks through the holidays. We partnered with the governor's office. By the way, this is when he launched our Digital Science Festival, and he's wearing a COSI tie. So a nice little plug for COSI there. And we partnered with the Mayor Alliance. When I talked about going throughout the state of Ohio, we actually partnered with the Mayor Alliance. At each city, we had a different mayor there standing with us, handing out kits. Here's just a subset of some of these mayors and elected officials. Here's just another smattering or a logo soup of all the partners, again, statewide. But we also really thought it was important to go beyond just this whole STEM and science education to feed kiddos, but we're going to leverage Feeding Hungry Minds and work now with social services. So we talk about Feeding Hungry Minds and fulfilling human services. So now our kits, we're giving them out in like Ava House and other places that have women who are going through recovery because they can use these kits to actually work with their kiddos and have some bonding time. We're working, of course, with foster homes, giving these kits to these kids, making sure they can learn some stuff. And now we're looking at how to support the homeless population similarly. So we're really proud of transcending that basic K-12 space to really being an additional part to the great Columbus network of social services. Our national partners, NASA. NASA actually partnered with us to produce their first science kit, and that's really cool. Here's just a sample of what it looks like. You got a bunch of NASA content and a bunch of COSI content. We partnered with the U.S. Department of Energy. This is, he's actually rotating out because there's new administration, but this was the head of the Secretary of Energy, Dan Briette. He came to COSI. This picture is at COSI. He opened the box. He got so excited. He said, you know what? You guys are going to do our first national energy box for us. We partner with Virgin Hyperloop. We are Virgin Hyperloop's national educational dissemination partner. They're so excited to work with us that both Mrs. Branson and Sir Branson actually tweeted and texted about COSI and how thrilled they are to partner with this organization in Central Ohio. Then we have our Color of Science program. This is a very simple concept. All scientists aren't old men with thick glasses and pocket protectors, but women make fantastic scientists and engineers, and so do people of color. Our first one was in December with Dr. Kathy Sullivan. You know her well. Our second one was this month with Caleb Anderson. This is a 12-year-old kid who got accepted into Georgia Tech to study astrophysics and aeronautical engineering. An amazing kid. February 4th is going to be Nicole Jackson. She's a PhD learning scientist and chief technology officer. Just really incredible people with great stories to mentor and motivate kids, girls, and persons of color. So what does success look like? Here's a line or a quote from a teacher. I won't read the whole thing, but at the end of the day, she was so thrilled with these kits that we sent her that she sent this note and she sent a picture of the kids. And here they are, loving our dinosaur kits. Really thrilled to learn about dinosaur technology. And then finally, probably my favorite image is here's Cover My Meds. We partner with them on the bio kit. We have a dinosaur kit, a water kit, a nature kit, etc., a space kit. We also have a life science or human body kit, and that's the partner with Cover My Meds. We were giving them out. We gave out 500 in Franklinton on a Sunday. Parents were coming, kids were coming, and then this thing happened. These two kids came to Franklinton on their own with no adult. They got the kits. They were so excited. Right there in the park, they started doing experiments. Look at that face. Truly priceless. The last thing I want to mention is, of course, we're launching our series. Hopefully you all know about this. This is a new primetime television show series called QED with Dr. B. It premieres tonight, so please check it out. Hopefully you like it. We're trying to bring science to the people where they live, learn, and lounge. So tune in. It's on WOSU at 7:30. And with that, what about COSI? Well, we're closed physically, but we've been very active. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Bertley. Every time I listen to you, you make me want to go back to science class.
Love it.
Joe Nardoni, you are next. I apologize, Joe. I didn't have the long E on your name when I said it the last time. So that's my COVID brain kind of, not working quite well. You are up with the presentation. And after your presentation, we will move to the Q&A portion of our discussion today.
Madam Chair, thank you so much, and don't ever worry about the pronunciation. It's great to be with you today. I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to the dialogue. I will admit that Dr. Bertley is a very tough act to follow. He's an inspiration to many of us. So I'm going to kind of go through the slides relatively quickly and look forward to the dialogue. And if anybody wants more depth, we can talk about it. But our first slide just talks a little bit about the Columbus Regional Airport Authority. We manage 3 airports, CMH, Rickenbacker, and Bolton Field. I do have to take time to mention, because 2 of my board members, 2 of my bosses are on this call today, Dr. Bertley and Kenny McDonald. They give so much to this airport authority. We're very grateful for them. So we enjoy working with them, and they never stop. They're just always helpful. The next slide talks a little bit about pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, the airport generated both direct and indirect about almost 59,000 jobs and $3.1 billion in annual payroll. We have a $12.9 billion impact, and approximately 1 in every 10 jobs in Ohio is related to the airport and airline industry. So we were doing really well. 2019 was a lot of fun. We had our biggest year ever. We had our best financial results. We had our most passengers. We had 8.6 million passengers. So we were all very, very happy. And you'll see on the next slide what happened starting in March. January and February were very good months for us, but in March, the pandemic hit. We were prepared. I can tell you that, as prepared as you can be for a pandemic. Airports in the U.S. are slated to lose $23 billion in revenue, and the Columbus Airport Authority is no exception to that. We lost over $40 million in revenue last year that was planned. And last year, we only served 3.6 million passengers, approximately 40% of what we served in 2019. So we had a big drop. We had generally we're at 1/3 the level. So we say 40%, but it was a little less than that. But we are weathering the storm. We were prepared. We have great leadership from our board. We have great staff here. We basically went into the cost saving mode, so we were able to work through that. We deferred a lot of spending. We deferred capital projects. We had hiring freezes. We had a voluntary separation program, and the federal government did help us with the CARES Act. We're very grateful to our congressional delegation for that. As we all know, airports are a pivotal part of an economic engine for the local communities. They're saying, and I am more optimistic than a lot of the professionals, that it's going to take until 2024 to come back. I'm optimistic that we're going to have a very good second half of this year, and we'll be bouncing back quickly. What I can really say about our team and our staff is, as a vital public service, we never closed for one moment, and our people just continue to deliver great service, both at Rickenbacker and here, but we also do work down, as I said, at Bolton Field. We said right away when this thing broke, health and safety first and business second, because if we didn't take care of the health and safety, it would be hard to take care of the business. So I will say Columbus is a unique community. So I've been here 3 years, and many of you know I came from Detroit and Detroit Metropolitan Airport, and I see many of my friends on this call. But we were ready. We had an emergency plan. We went into action the day the first case was discovered in the U.S., but we got so much help from the community. We, as an airport, looked really smart in the airport industry for a couple of reasons. One reason, we delivered a safe work playbook, and that was with the help of the Columbus Partnership. They had a draft copy of that. We put that together. We made it our own. And once it got out in the industry, there were 400 other airports that downloaded or used that safe work playbook that we created here, that our staff created. So we were way ahead of the curve. Further, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, Brian Ross, who look forward to hearing from, he's very modest about this, but Brian took us to the GBAC Star accreditation. We were one of the first airports in the whole world and one of 4 Columbus entities that got a GBAC Star accreditation for cleanliness. So thank you, Brian. Thank you, Columbus Partnership. Everybody was working together. Columbus and Columbus airports were ahead of the curve because of this great community. So our task right now is to make travelers safe, feel safe. We have what we think the safest airport that we can have. We are doing all the things that we are supposed to be doing. In fact, Dr. Bertley heard this yesterday, and Kenny McDonald. We got our highest customer service scores ever in 2020, which is kind of a strange thing to report. But in the middle of a pandemic, our customers were so happy with the service that was delivered by our team here. We've also added PPE vending machines, increased sanitation, plexiglass barriers, and have done everything we can to try and make customers feel safe. Moving on, Jen, to the next slide. I spoke about this a few minutes ago. Recovery will not happen overnight, but we are optimistic, and I tend to be more optimistic than most. I can tell you, we are working very aggressively on air service development. So we lost many flights, although many have come back. We still have Seattle on the West Coast. We don't have LA. We've lost Salt Lake. We're hoping all of those things are temporary. We've lost San Francisco. Industry experts are saying 2024. We are hoping for a much sooner recovery, and I think that we're starting to see some signs of that. What I want to do and what we want to be able to do is encourage folks to know that we are doing everything that we can do and that flying is safe. People are going to fly when they're comfortable flying, and we don't want to push people, but we're anxious to have folks back, and we're ready for our passengers when they're ready to come back. As I said, air service development is really important. We've been working very closely with the airlines, been working very closely with our business partners. Dr. Bertley has agreed. We're talking with our staff about vaccination, and thankfully Dr. Bertley is going to speak with our staff. Thank you, Dr. Bertley, later in February to encourage our folks to be vaccinated. So we're continuing to do everything we can to create a comfort level. What we can ask people to do again is fly when they're comfortable to fly. We encourage them in both the city of Columbus and Franklin County have passed resolutions to encourage their travel policy to get folks to fly direct, and we appreciate that. And again, we don't want to be pushy, but we think we're ready. We're going to continue doing the things we can do. We now have touch-free parking areas. I'm going to just go to the last topic, which everyone is interested in. We have not given up on building the terminal that this city in Mid-Ohio deserves. So while the pandemic has been a setback, and it's certainly cost us money, we are trying to find a way, and Dr. Bertley and Kenny McDonald and the rest of our board will be very instrumental in trying to find a way to build a terminal that this community deserves. So we're optimistic, we're continuing to work hard, we have a path and a plan, and we're looking forward to talking to these to the committee members and to the community about how we can continue to serve this community. And Madam Chair, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you so much, Joe. And now we're going to turn it over to, we'll have both of you participate. I know Tom Katzenmeier may want to participate along with Brian Ross as we move into the Q&A portion of our discussion. The floor is open to our committee members to ask questions.
Christy, can I start?
Absolutely.
Okay, Frederick, it's great to see you. I can't talk as fast as you, though, and I wish you well tonight. We'll all be watching you tonight. But I want you to put your scientist hat on for all of us if you can. I'd like your opinion on this. So suddenly, within a week, it feels a lot different to have a different leader running the country, and he's talking about that he's purchased 200 million more vaccinations, and it sounds like there's a plan, and I think in the arts, except for the art museum in Franklin Park, virtually everything else is closed. We need to get things back up and running, start selling tickets again, generating revenue for you. Are you feeling better now about this overnight change that's happened?
You're on mute. You're on mute, Frederick.
I just wanted to check. Can everyone hear me okay? And you answered. All right, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Tom, that's a great question. So people are worried about the Biden administration promising 100 million doses in 100 days. How can that be? We had such a slow start. It's important to appreciate the previous administration just didn't have an infrastructure set up. So the vaccines were there and people were debating, did they have enough vaccine produced or not? They had vaccine doses there. They just didn't have the framework set up to actually logistically ship them out and then administer them to people. Now, it's important to understand, we've never in the history of this country, frankly, in the history of the world, tried to deliver this many vaccines. I mean, we basically vaccinate babies and kiddos as they grow older, and then people were traveling to far countries and then maybe the medical staff, right? So in any given year, you're talking about trying to vaccinate maybe 4 to 5 to 6 million people a year, maybe 7 or 8. You're not thinking of trying to vaccinate 100 million. So, aside from people like Amazon and other folks who have figured out the logistics of delivering stuff en masse, there was no infrastructure there. So what the Biden administration really did as they were doing their transition and onboarding is they were looking into how can we figure out that infrastructure, and they've done a lot so far. So will they get to 100 million in 100 days? It's actually very possible they could, but even if they don't get there, they're going to get close to it. And that is, to your question, is very encouraging for me. Where I get a little concerned is this whole talk about herd immunity is based on getting roughly 70% of the people to be vaccinated. And as you all hear on TV and on the news cycle, there is a lot of concern about taking the vaccine in general amongst a bunch of people, but then especially under, Black and brown populations who legitimately have concerns over kind of the medical practice of the United States of America over 200 years or so. So the vaccines will come. Will they come fast enough? I don't know, but it's safe to say by mid to late summer, certainly by end of summer, July, August, anybody who wants to be vaccinated will be able to get a vaccine. Tom and everybody else, the issue is if people decide they don't want to get vaccinated, we're not going to get rid of this bug. Now, it'll still be reduced. It won't be at the crazy infection levels here. So even if we get 50% people vaccinated, We're going to lower the amount of virus that's out there, but to get rid of it so we don't have to wear masks anymore and we can hug people again and get back to the normal way we are, people are going to have to get vaccinated. And you can't force somebody to do so unless the government decides to do so. And that's a whole other, I don't want to get into that scenario.
Thank you.
Very well.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you so much for bringing these two important or the backbone of our city. I have a question for Mr. Nardon. My organization is serving New Americans here in Columbus, and my organization is called Ethiopian Tawhid Social Services. So I had a meeting with parents, and one of the parents working at the airport said during this pandemic that he is still working, but very, very less hours. He couldn't get an employment because still he's working, and he was worried about, how to cover his mortgage. Is that still the case, or things are now improving? And on the other side, for Dr. Bartley, thank you so much for the donations of about 350 kits. Your testimony, what you're talking about for our kids, really they enjoyed it, the dinosaur kits, that's great. And let's keep up, and thank you so much. But I hope that's my really testimony for him.
Thank you, Dr. Saleshi.
Yes.
Stephanie Hightower, I can't see you for some reason, I don't know why, but I see that you have a question.
I do have a question, and if you saw what I look like, you probably would not want me to be. I don't even know how to turn this thing on anyway, Hannah. I don't know how to turn it on. And Hannah, I finally just figured out today how to get on with the panelists. So please, I am challenged, and I told Hannah, she privately told me I could put my question in the chat, but I told her I was just being facetious because I am old, Dr. Burley, and I wanted to ask you the question right after, and Christy made me wait, and I'll forget my question, and I probably have forgotten it by now. Anyway, anyways, Dr. Burley, I wish the Biden administration would hire you, but then that means that you would go away from us. I'm serious, because he's just so smart and just what he brings to the table. But my question really is, in all seriousness, the kits that you did, those are phenomenal. There are those of us who are in preschool, that we run preschool programs. Is there a kit for our babies? Or are you still working on that one? And if so, I know Head Start, a lot of us would love to be able to have those kits for pre-K.
You got it. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Saleshi, for the shout out. I appreciate the fact that you and your constituents received those kits. So thank you for that. Ms. Hightower, great question. The short answer is absolutely. The first round of kits we have, which are water, nature, space, dinosaurs, and human body, those were made for roughly elementary to middle school. So roughly grade 2 to grade 6-ish or so. We are now in the middle of our production for our pre-K kits. And we're starting first with dinosaurs because we know kiddos love dinosaurs. And so those will be ready either late February, but by mid-March for sure at the latest. And we'll definitely work with you and your other colleagues to make sure you get them. But yes, to your point, you can't start too young. So we're dialing it back to earlier ages, roughly 3, 4, and 5 years old. We'll be able to use those kits.
And where are the kits for the old people?
Oh, that's coming out. That's the QED with Dr. B kit. So now that you said that, make sure when I give it to you, you use it. So we're working on a next generation of kits for adults, and it's going to mirror the show. The show deals with cutting edge topics like viruses, bacteria, climate change, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence. And so we're going to have a kit for really cool stuff. So Stephanie, I will make sure that's delivered to your door. I know where you live.
No, in all seriousness, we have, a lot of us do, and I don't mean to dominate Chrissy, we have older adults populations that we serve. And especially in the minority communities, this would really be phenomenal if we could have these for those adults who may not have gotten this kind of information while they were in school, but would have an appreciation for it. So I think that's phenomenal. So I'll get in touch with you. Miss you. Bye.
You got it. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And yes, we'll stay in touch about this.
I'm sorry, Christy, this is Brian. Can I jump in and maybe help answer Dr. Slessy's employment question?
Yes.
So it was a great question. And in Central Ohio, the travel and leisure industry in January of 2020 had over 100,000 jobs. In April and May alone, I'm sorry, middle of March through the end of April, lost 47,000 of those jobs in those two-month period of time. As we've gone through the rest of the year, the latest numbers that we have, there are still 26,000 jobs that have not been filled. So whenever you talk about social physical distancing, obviously that's catastrophic for the travel economy. And when you start looking at how we recover, that's going to be very important, because as Dr. Bertley was talking about, people want to travel. There's a recent survey, 80% of Americans want to travel, but the vaccinations are going to dictate when, where, and how. Most are going to drive. So most aren't planning any travel until the middle of this year. So this industry is still in survival mode, because there's a lot of restaurants, there's a lot of hotels, even some of our wonderful attractions will be struggling for the next 3 to 4 months. So there's a lot of challenges out there. So how we look at how we can recover is important, but right now we have to survive and then recover. And I think with what comes with that is how we recover with equity, because when you look at the industry, we are underserved just based on the percentages of Franklin County, the Black population, Black and brown. Our industry only has about 16% of Black and brown individuals in the industry, and the population's 24%. So that should be the minimum. Our Asian and Indian population, percentage-wise, are appropriately represented, but still at a low amount. So, there's a lot to go with that. And again, I don't want to dominate the conversation either, but I think what's important too, particularly for a lot of people on this call, is the impact with the decrease in visitation in this economy, the impact it has on Franklin County's sales tax, which is important to all of us on this call. In 2019, it was $30 million in Franklin County sales taxes that came in through the travel economy. The bed tax, which a lot of us are supported through the bed tax, that was $50 million. And we already know that we lost 57% of that in 2020. So there's a lot of financial challenges coming into that as well.
Madam Chair, if I could follow up with Brian, is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and Dr. Saleshi asked a question about some of the folks out here at the airport. I can tell you that we have been very fortunate at the Columbus Regional Airport Authority, the governmental entity. We have not laid off anyone due to the pandemic, but it's been a real challenge because we've lost 2/3 of our business. There are folks in the concessions business and the fueling business and the cargo and all kinds of businesses that have certainly lost employees, and people are struggling. So we've been fortunate, but there's some job loss. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Brian, can you, Melissa, and we're going to get to your question in just a minute, but I want to follow up with Brian on two things, and Tom. So two things. First, can either one of you, and we've had a presentation from Megan Kilgore some time ago, but can you both just give the brief overview of the bed tax for those who don't understand, maybe don't know completely how the bed tax works, because so many of us receive bed tax funds. I say us because Human Services receive bed tax funds as well. And then the other thing is, Brian, can you talk a little bit about, because I know you all look far out, right, at convention business and so forth. Can you talk about what you're seeing in terms of conventions returning, types of conventions and size and so forth, what you can share?
So I'll start with the bed tax. So Greater Columbus Arts Council, Experience Columbus, each get a slice of the bed tax. That's been in place for several decades. 2019 was a record year for the bed tax. I think it was $48 or $49 million total. It obviously collapsed in 2020, starting in March when this hit. Both Brian and my organizations, we've just approved our new budgets for 2021. He's budgeting bed tax at 58 for this is for the year, calendar year 2021. He's budgeting bed tax at 58% of the record year 2019. So we're still not assuming anywhere near the record year on the bed tax. We're doing the same thing here at GCAC. We're being just ever so slightly a little bit more conservative than Brian, like 1% or 2% less than that. So like 56% of the record year. We both view the recovery happening in the back half. So not right now by any means at all. There's no conventions. I mean, you know, we can give you exact stats on this, but we do see some meetings coming back. We clearly see the leisure travel being the first part of this. Drive traffic, people coming to Columbus, people coming to see their families. We are ready. We're going to be ready for this when the timing works. We want to reopen the city in the worst way, as you can all imagine. People are hungry for their art. They're hungry to go to Coastside. They're hungry for their cultural attractions. The next key indicator on this is probably going to be festival season. So festival season in Columbus brings about 2 million people downtown. It starts with the Asian Festival, which is at Franklin Park Conservatory Memorial Day weekend. The Memorial Tournament is after that. The Columbus Arts Festival is after that. You've got Pride, you've got Red, White, and Boom, Jazz Ribs, Festival Latino, ComFest, all of that. So that's the next kind of inflection point. That's why I kind of asked Frederick, you know, hearing that President Biden has ordered up 200 million more doses of vaccine, I'm encouraged by that. I'm optimistic. Brian and I are natural optimists on all this. You know, I'm not going to give you a pessimistic outlook, but we're on the cusp of having to make some of these decisions pretty soon, like in a month or 6 weeks, about whether or not we can bring 400,000 people downtown June 11th, 12th, and 13th. So that's the next. And then we're all looking, of course, at the fall season, because everything's being moved to fall. You know, everybody that has an event, a gala, wants to reopen, football season, whatever those things are. Everyone's looking now at what date in September can I have my event now, you know, because we can't do them in the spring. So that's kind of where we all are, but we have very practical estimates on what the bed tax is going to do for us. Both of our organizations get significant support from the county commissioners. Whenever you see a county commissioner, you need to thank them for that. And as you all know, we also now get funding from a 5% ticket fee that is in place in the city of Columbus on arts, culture, sports, and entertainment. And I would tell you this, as you can imagine, that is grossly underperforming right now. So until we get things back up and running. So with that, Brian, I don't know what you would want to add to that.
No, I think that was I'm glad to see that we had our board meeting today, and Tom and Dr. Bertley and Joe and everybody was all over the numbers, so I'm glad to see that. Yeah. But the bed tax distribution, as you know, Tom alluded to, both of our organizations are a part of that, and it's the largest funding mechanism for our organization. I believe it is the largest for GCAC. It also funds dollars for the Greater Columbus, the Franklin County Convention Center. And if they do not have certain amount of tax, they have to go back to the city and county. So that's very important. But Christy, as you said, there's also 30 different human service organizations that typically get around $3 million a year. Affordable housing is a part of that. They get around $2 million a year. So all of that was obviously severely impacted in 20, and it's not going to be much better in 2021. And so that's important as we move forward.
Thank you, Brian and Tom. And there is a comment, Tom, for you in the chat from Ariana, who said you made her heart flutter when you started talking about festivals. Mine too, Ariana. I just want to be able to go to a festival. Can I just one? Let me turn it over now to Melissa Johnson on our committee, who has a question. Melissa?
Hi, yes. My question is, do you anticipate flight rates going up once our COVID-19 numbers drop?
So I think that's for you.
Melissa, good afternoon, Melissa. Yes, absolutely. Again, it's a challenge of comfort. So if we can get our folks comfortable, if we can get significant vaccinations, from our perspective, we are very, very anxious to see people getting vaccinated. I read about it every single day. The numbers are not where they need to be, but for the airport industry to rebound, we need folks vaccinated, and we need people comfortable that they can fly safely.
I guess my question was really in regards to ticket prices and rates. Like, will that be put on to the community?
So ticket prices and rates, I have been asked that question 1,000 times since I've been in the airport business, a little over 8 years, and I cannot explain the way that airlines set rates. What I can tell you is we are hard at work at trying to get new entrants into this market, and when you get new entrants into the market, it usually drives rates down. So right now, we're just trying to make up and pick up ground that we had in the past that we've lost, but we do have some opportunities. Southwest, as you can see, has been very competitive in the rate situation, but it ultimately, there are less and less flights because they can't fill them. The airlines can't afford to fly aircraft with 30, 40% full as they did during the early days of the pandemic. So it's hard for me to say what's going to happen to rates, but we're all optimistic that as travel comes back, rates will kind of normalize.
I would like to also share that Joe and his team have, and us as a community, have a tremendous fight ahead of us, I believe, because it's not easy to regain all the wonderful flight options that we had, that the authority and Joe and his leadership and Kenny McDonald and others were able to fight to get us. So, that's going to be something that we all have to, whenever we can do a flight and support that direct flight, we have to, because it's going to be very difficult. As Joe said, it's about where you're going to get the load, and we don't want to be one of the last communities coming on board. So it's going to be a challenge for all of us. And I know Joe and his team are working hard on that.
Thank you for that, Brian. We are, and we're optimistic, but Brian is so right. So the only way that we get new flights is by having people sit in the seats. And in the 3 years that we were here, in the first year that I was here, we get Seattle, we get San Francisco, we got Salt Lake City. So you have to start with an S to be a new flight, non-stop flight to Columbus. But we've lost some of those flights. We think they'll come back. Columbus is a very sophisticated, very aggressive, very cosmopolitan city, and the airlines like Columbus, but they need to make money.
Thank you, Joe. Sandy Doyle-Ahern has the next question, and then Michael Smithson, you are up after that, and then I think Elizabeth Martinez, and I see Keith Stevens also has a question. So we're like a runway. We're backed up on questions here. Sandy, you're next.
Okay, thank you. It's so good to see both of you. I miss my friends. Joe, actually, what we were just talking about, I think, is a good segue to what I was going to ask you, maybe to explain a little bit to the group. When I go back and look at the data and the numbers and the drop and so forth, my question relates to the economic impact of this, because it's it's been pretty evident over the last several years, part of the effort around adding cities and destinations from Columbus isn't just about pleasure and leisure. There were very much specific business reasons and economic development reasons for that work. And I think it's important for this group to understand not only that connection, that losing those actually is related to losing business opportunities, so regaining them is important. But I also wondered if you could touch on what you're seeing with the numbers starting to come back. Do you have any good sense of whether that is business travel, pleasure, or a little bit of a combination, or what you see happening with those trends?
So that's a great question. And it's so nice to see you, my friend. I miss you. And I look forward to our lunches again sometime soon. So the answer to the question is we started to recover starting back in May, June, July. Most of the travel was leisure. What we're hearing now is that it's probably 80 to 85% leisure. There is some business travel coming back, but the airlines that have been suffering have been the business traveling. Delta, for instance, is a very heavy business travel airline. So the ones that bounce back quickly were the Allegiants and the Spirits and some of those other folks that really travel to vacation destinations. Frankly, and I don't know the exact numbers, but South Florida and some places have not really seen the kind of effects on COVID that we have because people kept flying to South Florida and to Texas and some Southern California destinations. So the answer to the question is the airlines are all banking right now on family, friends, catching up, vacations. Business is a lagging factor right now, Sandy. So and I don't know if Kenny's actually on this call, but we've had calls with economic development folks. And while we've been encouraging people, again, we want people to be comfortable. We don't want to push on that. And people, I think, will get comfortable soon enough. But we have been encouraging the business community to fly because what we're hearing is once competitors start flying, they're going to fly. So if you're an architect or an engineer and you have to compete with somebody for a job in Tennessee or New York or wherever, and you're seeing your competitors start flying, then you're going to get on an airplane.
Thank you.
And Sandy, I think it's also important to understand the outbound versus the inbound. And as Joe was saying, a lot of that's leisure. A lot of the leisure is outbound, not as much inbound. When you look at the 10 million visitors that we have that sort of stay the night in our community and that are leisure travelers, we're still, a lot of that's a drive destination, about 72% of them. But it is very important for our businesses. It's very important for our convention business. There's a tremendous amount of reasons that we definitely have to have those flights and access.
Thank you.
You know, Sandy, to add on, and Michael, you're next in the queue to ask a question, but to add to your question, I think, one of those, the query or the question is, to the business community, and, they may or may not be ready to talk about this, but given the virtual nature of our work over the last now year, what kind of, adaptations will they make around business travel, the need to travel to a location for business versus doing something virtually? I think that'll be something good for us to, maybe some of our business partners here, will be able to talk about that. But I think, that's probably going to be leading into a lot of discussions when you find that you can do something, in a different way for a less expensive way. I don't know, but that's got to be on the minds of, especially the bean counters in business. So more to come, I guess, on that. Perhaps in phase 2, we can dig into that a little bit more, with this particular cohort. Michael, you are up next.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christine, it was funny, my question actually kind of parallels on what you were just saying in the way that, as I see that there's potentially a good window of opportunity for us, right, to capture some of that business travel if it does, or if we forecast that may open back up. And potentially, I guess, looking at, have we been thinking about ways to do that? It seems like a lot of cities like us have done a good job of, folks have moved out of New York, big cities, other places are coming back to their Midwest roots, for example, right? and are doing that. At some point, they're probably going to have to go back to some level of business travel, even if it's not as much as it maybe had been for a while, and it may take several years for that to fully recover. So it seems like, are there things that we can do, or are you guys already thinking about this, Joe, of ways to be prepared for that and maybe try to capture some of that in advance? Is there some pre-thinking on, yeah, that's a market we really want to grab, or do we really see that as an opportunity or not?
So, Michael, that's a great question. Thank you. And you sound like you work here, so thank you for that. So we have been hard at
a lot, so
well, thank you, and please travel more when you feel like it. I can tell you that we are hard at work and soon to have a discussion with Dr. Bertley about some air service types of opportunities. But we were working on this even before COVID, obviously, but we get very laser focused during COVID, are working on all kinds of different things. And I can say this without being able to share some things just quite yet. We are being extremely aggressive. So we know that we have to be. There is no substitute for a nonstop flight.
Yep.
So having come from Detroit Metropolitan Airport with a few more flights than Columbus, we've been very strategic at trying to attack the nonstop flights. And of course, Kenny McDonald was on that long before I arrived in Columbus. But there are things that you have to do to compete, because it's just like I view air service development. I said this today to our air service person, much like economic development. If you're not the first and the best, somebody else is going to beat you. So we stay ahead of it all the time. I'd like to be as good as Kenny McDonald is, but we're working on it.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
And I think Elizabeth Martinez, you are up next.
Yes, good afternoon. Sign me up for the festivals team. We're bring that team together. So my question is for Dr. Bertley. Hi, Dr. Bertley. Long time no see. I'm part of the testimonial group of organizations that have greatly benefited from kits to be able to distribute to children in our program. What I appreciate, obviously that like the crisis for many of us has been the birthplace of, creativity and innovation, and glad to see all of the traction that is happening around the kits, not only in, bringing COSI to kids, but also being thoughtful about how we can target other groups in the community to have access to these educational experiences. My question is, one, how do you see this, post-pandemic, some of this innovation continuing? And then the second question is, what does partnership look like with educational institutions as we're having, we're, at the center right now of education recovery for many kids in our programs?
Yeah, well, Elizabeth, first of all, great to see you as well. It's been way too long. Second of all, you're spot on. For many sectors, and I'll speak specifically for my sector, for the science museum sector, we've known for a long time that our bricks and mortar model, which we love for you to come into the building, that's, because of these handheld devices where you can access information instantly on science and technology, attendance just in general across the country has been waning. So we've all known we had to think about, okay, what do we do that's bricks and mortar are independent? How do we go offsite? How do we go online in a real way? It's so hard to compete online because it's such a saturated space, but what can we do and how do we differentiate ourselves? So all the pandemic did for us is accelerate aspects of our strategic plan. We were thinking about kits. We already launched a science festival out there in the community. We were thinking about how do we get into schools in better, more ubiquitous ways. So we've been thinking about all that, but now the pandemic just shut our doors. And so we're forced to make it happen. So to that point, we are absolutely going to continue doing these things and continue to think about how to further ideate them. It's not like, oh, this is a safety net just to keep us afloat while the pandemic's there, but we will absolutely continue things like the kits, our digital services, COSI Connects. There's a lot of free Wi-Fi services we have. Our COSI on Wheels that used to do field trips to schools and do big things. We can't do that. We refit those box trucks into digital hotspots, and now they drive to the communities that have an internet desert or have Wi-Fi deserts, and they act as hotspots so people can download stuff for free, et cetera, et cetera. So all these things will continue, and hopefully we can innovate around them further. Regarding the partnerships, in particular, the K through 12 space or even K through 16 space, that is absolutely critical to our model. So we're in discussions with the Ohio Department of Education. We're also in discussions with departments of education across the country. We're also in discussions with the STEM network. And so to figure out how to work at the leadership level, and we're not saying our kits are the answer for science education. We are saying our kits are part of that narrative to help build on other resources. And so we're working with all these kind of higher up partners to figure out how they can disseminate them in massive ways. And so when I talked about being in Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and of course, Ohio, that's how we're doing it. Yes, we do local. We also work at the higher level to penetrate as many kiddos and classrooms and parents' homes as possible. So thank you for the question, but you're spot on. It was really, the pandemic for many of us has just been a catalytic agent to be more efficient, more creative, and faster.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bertley, and thank you, Elizabeth, for that question. Keith Stevens, I know you had a question about the private and the corporate flight activity. I'm not sure if that question was answered or if you have another question, so you are up.
Yeah, thank you, Christy. And this question is for Joe. And let me preface my question with the fact that we actually, airport's a client, but we have 4 clients that are housed in 3 of the hangars that are on the north side of the airport. The business we've done with them from 2020 until now has not waned at all. Their stock prices for those 3, there's 3 that are public, their stock prices have held, and the private obviously is doing well. My question to you, have you seen any reduction in private flight out of the airport? And I think it really ties to Christy's point around remote work, and maybe that's impacting some of the flights that used to take place from a private perspective.
So hi, Keith. It's great to see you, and it's a pleasure, as always. What I can answer the question in this way. So what happened after the pandemic hit was everyone was looking to fly private. So I think all of those businesses did very well. And everybody who could afford to fly private was trying to find a way to fly private. I think generally the business is not quite as good as it was back in March, April, May, but it has not tailed off significantly. Private folks who can fly private tend to still do that. And I've heard of no significant drop off, and it's an option for some. So to answer your question directly, I think private flying was very much in demand March, April, May, June of last year, and has continued to be a driver here at this airport.
Thanks, John. Hey, thanks for your leadership as well as Dr. Bertley. And Dr. Bertley, I got to get with you offline and find out where you get that hat. I'd like to have one of those.
You got it. Happy to share.
You're very kind, Keith. Thank you.
Are there other questions for our panelists from our committee? I would like to ask maybe the final question of really all of you. You know, as you think about this committee, you know, many have come forward and, you know, offered suggestions for, you know, whether it's advocacy for some type of change or something that perhaps helps them continue to recover, you know, in a resilient way, in an equitable way from the pandemic. Some have, you know, offered, you know, a policy change here or there. Do you have any of those types of suggestions or ideas that you'd like to bring forward to the committee? And I don't want to put you on the spot. If you want to think about it, you can always get back to us or shoot Hannah an email as well.
So, Christy, if I could jump in, I know from the larger picture within the industry, a big part of it is as being resilient moving forward and providing prosperity in the community is as we recover with equity. I think that's a big part of it. There are, you know, we are very underrepresented in a lot of our parts of our segments of our industry. I think a lot of it comes down to the workforce development, which we're working on, but also the education and exposure, because just in a lot of my interactions and speaking to a lot of people, there's still that cultural perception that, you know, in the hospitality side of things, you're flipping burgers or making beds. And, you know, there's sales, accounting, marketing, PR, human resources, entrepreneurs. on a regular basis, technology. So there's a lot of things that I hope we can work together on how we try to set up to be more resilient within the community in this industry. And I think that curriculum, and that's a big part of it, even starting to get exposure and education from a high school standpoint, and then through, we have a great, Franklin, or I'm sorry, the Columbus State is wonderful in this industry. Ohio State has something, but we need to, and again, we have to help drive it in from our position, my position, our organization, but it's a community effort. But we really have to get more, we have to represent our community better in many different aspects. So I think that's the big ask I would have as a whole, because we have very talented individuals on this committee that represent a lot of different cultural aspects of the community that I would love to engage and understand how we can do better.
Thank you. Well said.
Well said, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Kind of be ready, right? In other words, let's do this work now and be ready so when the jobs come back, you have the people and people representative of the community, and people see it as a career. Yep. Not just one type of job, but multiple types of jobs and a career.
Yep. And the jobs will come back. The industry is resilient. People need to see people. The number one expenditure and disposable income is travel. That's not going to change. How we do it is going to change somewhat sometimes, and how we interact. There will be a new digital aspect to meetings and virtual, but the face-to-face will not go away.
Yeah, no, we certainly hope not. Okay, well, it's 4:33, so everyone gets about 27 minutes back in their day, in their calendar. I think probably everyone could use a few extra minutes. I want to thank our panelists today for joining us. You all been great. We know that it's been challenging for you during this time. You got hit early with when this started, and we just want to thank you so much for bringing forward kind of your story, but also the ideas, and thank you for being creative in the delivery of your services, and including some of the sectors that wouldn't, naturally be included. So especially to you, Dr. Bertley, we really appreciate you now thinking about the human services. I see Denise shaking her head because Alvis was represented, homeless children, the whole 9 yards. I mean, what a great way to now partner. So, speaking from that part of from that sector. So we really appreciate everything that you all are doing. And as I tell all panelists, we reserve the right to call you back or ask you more questions when we get into to the second phase of this, which is coming later in February, because, we may forget something or things change, right? The landscape may change. We may want updates and so forth. So hopefully you will answer our call or our email, and we just, again, thank you for being here with us today and taking all of our questions. To the committee, next week is Transportation 2.0. So everybody remembers January 6th and Transportation Day. We needed a do-over. And so that's our do-over day. Thank goodness we have a do-over day. And then following transportation will be higher ed. And that's on, I believe, February 10th, I think is that date. Is that right, Hannah? Okay. So we're getting close to the end of phase one. The team is going to be sharing soon with me some ideas. They've been ideating around what phase two looks like, and we hope that we'll be sharing that with you all very soon as well. So look forward to that. I know we're all looking forward to kind of the next phase and really digging in, getting our, starting to put ideas together for the mayor, council president, and the county commissioners. Melissa Johnson asked Frederick if there's a contact for the COSI kits.
COSI.org. You can just go to our website, COSI.org. You'll see a big thing that says kits. Click on that. And if you want to personalize or customize stuff, feel free to shoot me an email at Bertley, my last name, at COSI.org. We'd love to work with you.
All right. Thank you all today for today, and we will see you next week when we talk about transportation.